I surmise that there must be a place in immense suffering where the soul and the spirit transcend the physical body, and I visited that place that day.
Life is suffering. I say in my book, people want to forget that, but
Right.
It is so.
Right.
And it is seasons that are great and seasons that are dark. And research resiliency demonstrates that it only takes one person to come out onto our balcony. Those are the people that stand and they are cheering you on. And we only need one person to believe. There was a big shift though early on, like I'm saying, 22, 23 years old, where I began to pray differently. And I began to shift and pray prayers of praise and thanksgiving instead of prayers of begging and questioning, God, will you do this? And I knew that He's good. Because this is how life is, right? It always is throwing us a curveball. A lot of people lack how you build resilience. Is you start with that first step and you start by saying, I will face this fear. And every time we conquer a fear, we conquer something of the unknown, we become stronger.
If you're new or watching this as a replay, welcome. We're so glad that you're here. Please subscribe to Defenders Live on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, and join our group on Facebook as well. And if you don't want to miss another episode, you can sign up for email notifications at defenders-live.com. Nannette Oatley Johnson is a wife, mother, nana, author, speaker, resiliency coach, and the 2001 U.S. Open wheelchair tennis singles and doubles champion. Each of these roles signifies a commendable achievement for any individual. Together, they form an extraordinary list of credentials for one person to attain. But when the woman who fits the bill is a sit-down person in a stand-up world, the magnitude of her accomplishments is astonishing. For nearly 40 years, Nannette's life has been a living testimony to the power of resilience. She was a former gymnast, dance choreographer, and amateur actress until a broken neck altered her life in 1982. Following her injury, she married and gave birth to 3 children within 3 years. In 1989, when her children were 5, 3.5, and 2, she began a single-parent career that encompassed 9 years. During that time, she completed a BA in counseling psychology and then an MA in counseling and human services. Nannette first picked up a tennis racket in 1993, 11 years after her injury. Since then, she's accrued 12 championship tennis titles, 6 singles and 6 doubles, 8 of them international wins, including the 2001 U.S. Open singles and doubles championship title. She has been featured in local, regional, and national media. Her book, Pain, Power, and Promise, 19 Ways to Turn Setbacks into Comebacks, is receiving rave reviews. Her sequel, Pain, Power, and Promise, 10 Answers to Suffering and the Supposed Goodness of God, is in the works. Nannette is also the author of a monthly blog and your daily dose of resilience quotes. Aside from her writing, she is a resilience coach and available online for individuals, couples, and families. And she also facilitates her 8-week resiliency group for personal growth and empowerment. Today, Nannette divides her time with her beloved husband, Lou, her weekly Nana Papa Day, where her grand gifts reign supreme, her writing and inspirational speaking engagements, her resiliency coaching, and training her Goldador dog, Winchester Wolf. That's a lot, but I thought it was important to give her a formal introduction worthy of introducing. Let's welcome Nannette Oatley Johnson onto the show. Hi, Nannette.
Hi, Laura.
Thank you so much for coming on. I am so excited about this interview.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be here with you.
We have a lot to go through. I hope you're up for it, and I've tried to condense it as much as I can. But I have to tell you that, so you guys should see this. This is the book that Nannette sent me that I read. I could have read this entire book in one day, but I didn't get it in the mail until late in the day, and I'm an early to bed kind of person. So I read this in 2 sittings, but I literally read half the book in one evening. I was so captivated by it. I could not put it down. And one of the things I loved about it was first of all, your writing style is unbelievable. The way you describe things, but also your honesty is what's so compelling in this book. Not just your honesty about how you did what you did, but just the honesty of the darkness was really what spoke to me, and I think speaks to all of us, right? And the goodness as well. Just an incredibly dynamic journey of a roller coaster ride, really, and how you unfold that in front of our eyes and what you've learned. I can barely put into words what this book has done for me. So thank you for writing this book.
Well, thank you for all your kudos. You also sent me an email so full of praise. And as I responded to you, it means everything to every author, and all the energy and time and effort that they put into writing a book to have a person respond such as you did. So I'm extremely grateful. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, let's dig in. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Just be prepared, guys. This book right here, I'm going to refer to so many times. And the reason why is because some of the things said in this book are said so eloquently and beautifully, put right to the point, really, right to the heart of the matter. If you would let me, and it might take me a second or two to find all the spots, but the first section I wanted to dive in is kind of at the beginning, the start of the journey, the accident. And this is under the topic, I guess, of suffering and loss. And you say a lot of things about suffering and loss that really resonated with me. And I'm going to tell you guys the page number so that when you buy this book on her website, which is NannetteOatleyJohnson.com, then you can go to these page numbers and look this up yourself. And this is going to be a little bit heavy to start out, just warning you, fair warning here. But on page 16, you start and you say, you're talking about when you were in the hospital and you had a halo on your head because you sustained a neck injury. So they had to put a halo on your head. And you said that in the beginning, I was beginning to wonder specifically when the doctor returned at a later date to tighten those bolts in my head with a pair of pliers, feeling the needle going into my head to numb the areas where the bolts were inserted, feeling the blood and tears dripping down my face and hearing the bones moan as he tightened the bolts was excruciating. I came close to passing out, but instead reined in my thoughts and found strength in my faith. I thought of Christ's crown of thorns. Oh my gosh, look at me.
You're going to get me going.
I thought of Christ's crown of thorns and my similar pain and piercings. I thought about a book I had once read describing hundreds of Christian martyrs who were tortured and then died in a grisly, heinous manner. I remembered my amazement at how the martyrs, men, women, and children were set ablaze by their persecutors. And in the midst of their infernos, witnesses saw them lift their hands in worship and heard them singing as they burned. I surmised that there must be a place in immense suffering where the soul and the spirit transcend the physical body. And I visited that place that day. That's only the first quote.
I thought I came prepared, but I didn't grab the Kleenex. I'm going to grab some out of my purse here.
Okay. Then on page 18, you say that people who sustain an SCI, which is, please tell me what that acronym is again.
Spinal cord injury.
Spinal cord injury, yes. People who sustain an SCI are buried alive in its wreckage. The injury is death to every familiar way of being in the world. Reaching deep inside themselves, they must scavenge in the rubble for the courage to dig out and find a way to reinvent their lives. I'm going to keep going here. So if you want to stop, then tell me if you want to say something, but there's a few more here and they all kind of go together. By the time my discharge date rolled out on June 6th, I had begun to find answers to several of my existential queries. I came to believe that we coexist with life's complexities, sufferings, and paradoxes, that our knowledge and understanding is limited, that life is not fair, and finally, to live resiliently, we must live what we believe and accept the uncertainties inherent in life. And I'm going to go skip a couple and go back. And I'm going to finish this with one last quote that was really impactful for me. I'm referring to my notes here. That's what I'm looking at because there's so many. It's crazy. So it says, this is referring to losing freedom. Losing the freedom inherent in upward mobility initially feels like you've been taken prisoner in hostile territory, surrounded by ruthless enemies. The emotional experience is the same regardless if the enemy's name is paralysis, cancer, or degenerative disease. Abruptly stripped of our humanity, we are forced to dig down deep and reappraise the sanctity of life. We are to rise up with hope. We must emerge fully convinced of its immeasurability. Worth is not based on what we do, how we look, or our social status. We have worth simply because we are. The crucible taught me about life's most valuable gifts: courage, integrity, and love. And then finally, you say about an encounter that reconnected you spiritually with strength and purpose. And it said at the end, so in confidence, I was able to cry out, God, whatever you had for me standing up, I'm just going to have to do sitting down. But what about that? What about any of what I just said is really speaking to you right now? Because there's so much depth in what you say. I think that's what really, I just feel your heart when I read your book.
Well, you quoted a lot of things.
I know.
There's a lot
so much
to unpack there. Yeah, the halo, and like I was saying earlier, those are the holes, and they remain. They don't do those surgeries anymore.
I wondered.
Since you gave me a big opening bio of kind of taking us forward to my life. Yeah. I'm playing wheelchair tennis now with a couple of guys in my community, and both of them broke their necks as well. And neither of them had the halo. So lucky me. Lucky you. Yeah. But you reading it obviously is like with anything, triggers back all of the emotions of that time.
Yeah.
And seeing the needles going in were to numb that area. So there were 2 bolts here, 2 bolts back there, and 2 right here. So there were 6 total. That was to numb here, but I described it. I could hear those needles going in, and then I could see the blood coming down my face. And no matter how much it numbed me, the tears, there was still the pain. And we find ourselves in intense pain like that, and intense trauma. And you've heard this of dissociating. Some people dissociate and go to a happy place. My faith for me is I went to that cross and that crown of thorns and thought, I know someone else who suffered. And that was comforting to me in that time. And the other quote where I was quoting the other people that were martyred, I don't know if you've ever heard of Fox's Book of Martyrs. I believe there's 3 volumes of it. And it just logs all of the early Christians who were martyred and how they were martyred. Back in Nero's garden, put his torches in his garden, burned alive. Well, obviously, the lions, fed to the lions in the Colosseums, but horrific accounts of early Christians being martyred. And reading that so young, I had read that at like age 19 and already made a commitment to God. Whatever you have for my life, I will serve you. I will endure.
And your accident happened when you were 21?
22.
22.
Yes. Okay. So that's where all of that, came and into my heart and my mind during such a traumatic time. I'm really fortunate. And as you know, I mentioned in my book that I came into a relationship with the Lord very early on in my life at 12 and a half. Wow. And, I built a very solid foundation. I don't think I wrote about this in my book, but I actually, when I was training as a gymnast, which was my junior high school years when I was highly competitive, I used to wake up in the morning an hour before school. Nobody told me to do this. My parents didn't tell me to do this. Nobody told me to do this. This was my choice. And I would spend 15 minutes in prayer, 15 minutes in worship.
Wow.
15 minutes reading the Word of God, and then 15 minutes of guys push-ups. So I was a pretty disciplined kid. And I grew immensely in my faith and my relationship with God in that time. Wow. And to where it was and we hear this all the time, it wasn't a religion. I had a personal relationship with the Lord. I was growing in my knowledge. I was speaking to him. I was hearing from him. I had a solid foundation before my injury. That obviously, faith is everything. And when it's that solid, I could handle that. And like you said, okay, God, whatever you had for me, standing up, I'm going to have to do sitting down. That wasn't entirely true because I was coaching gymnastics when I got injured. And obviously I couldn't do that. Right. And my whole life changed after my injury. But I knew that God was still going to use my life and I would give it to him and he would have to do whatever he was going to do with me rolling through life instead of walking and running. So.
I love that. I also love how you described how you came to that. It wasn't just like you just instantly bounced back and here we go. That's what books make it sound like, sometimes. And you don't do that. You let us go along the roller coaster ride with you, which I appreciate because that's how life really happens.
It is. And life is a series of ups and downs. Life is suffering. I say in my book, people want to forget that, but it is so.
Right.
And it is seasons that are great and seasons that are dark.
Yeah.
And I think about, I thank God for King David's life, because anybody who's read the Bible knows of his life. It was a messy, messy family.
Mm-hmm.
There was adultery, murder, rape, sibling rivalry, his own son trying to a coup on the throne. There was all kinds of sin and all kinds of pain. And he wrote the book of Psalms. And if you read the book of Psalms, it's an up and down as well. There's times he is yelling at God.
Yeah.
He is angry at God. And then times he is weeping and crying out from a heart that is just broken beyond repair, he feels. And then times where, like the verse, it says, as the deer pants, let me get this right. Yes, as the deer pants after the water brook, so does my heart pant after thee, O God. So the times where he's crying out for a deeper relationship. And I think about how sorrow and joy, that this is a cycle. And what I want to say about that, it is normal. And David addresses that and lived that. And I feel that if he were alive today, he would have been diagnosed bipolar and they would have medicated him. No, we are going to go through ups and downs. That is a normal part of life. And we need to accept that.
Yeah.
It's very important too, because I also chose never to be medicated post-injury, but to sit with suffering, because it is sitting with suffering that the deepest lessons of life, spirituality, and character, that's where they're learned, is in the dark night of the soul.
Gosh, you have a way with words, Nanette. You really do. And that's a perfect lead into what I wanted to talk about next, which is the falling apart process. I can relate to, and I'm working on it, but I can relate to wanting to be the person that never falls apart, always wanting to be the strong person, what I perceive to be strong. And what I'm learning is that strength isn't found in holding everything in. The strength is really in the beauty of falling apart, letting go, and rebuilding. And so I wanted to speak to that here in some little places in your book here. And there's about 5 of them. So please bear with me. And a couple of them are paragraphs. So, and it's funny because they're spread throughout your book. And these topics that I'm talking about, I found little glimpses of all throughout the book. And so if you would let me here, starting on page 55, it says, as I view it, it is not the disruption that is the illness. Instead, disease is the failure to disrupt when disruption is called for, and the failure to reintegrate forward to form a new synthesis. Falling apart is often a necessary prelude to personal renewal following significant stressful events. If you don't give yourself permission to fall apart, you are more vulnerable to future stressors, sickness, and unhealthy, disordered behaviors. If we are not externally screaming, stop the merry-go-round, I want to get off, our bodies will scream it internally. That is just so powerful to me to read that. And let me move on to page 153. So this is skipping ahead quite a bit, but still speaks to falling apart. It says, we long to forget that falling apart and putting the pieces of our lives back together again is a recurring theme throughout the life cycle. Sometimes a thunderbolt will shoot from a clear sky, and sometimes into the midst of a peaceful family. Without warning of gathered storm above or slightest tremble of earthquake beneath, will fall a terrible fact. And from that moment, everything is changed. The air is thick with cloud and cannot weep itself clear. Oh, there may come a gorgeous sunset. There may come a gorgeous sunset, though. Paradoxically, a defining moment can be a glorious event that changes our life, or a moment so terrifying that it rocks our world to the core. All that is familiar is instantly distorted. All that used to be important no longer matters. And it sounds like that's what happened to you. And let's see here. Oh, page 162. No matter how tempting it is when our children break our hearts or traumas rip us apart, we must resist the seducing enticements, whatever their form, to anesthetize our souls. We must take courage, sit with our suffering, choose to feel, and choose to let grief do its lustrous work.
If I may, for your audience as well, just give how the book is formatted. Each chapter is written, as you know, that's a hidden pearl, Payne's hidden pearl. And I have it right here because I love this. Can you see this? I have this full oyster and pearl in crystal. Wow. And a special gift given to me by my husband. We also, in our living room, we have a beautiful wooden floor. And when we were having it put in, we decided to put in tokens of each family member that they could put something into the floor and then it would be covered. And so for me is a pearl in there. And so the theme of, so each chapter has Payne's hidden pearl. And then what I'm giving the reader is a resilient tool. That's what that hidden pearl is. Here's a resilient tool for your life. So, and then the second thing I wanted to say is 2 of those beautiful quotes have footnotes. Those were not my words. I don't want to take credit. For the first one, as you said, is Dr. Frederick Flock in his book. And I don't remember the name of his book, but it's footnoted at the end of my book. But the part about disruption and that process. And that is an imperative. He says it's necessary. It's not only healthy, but necessary. As you know, because I do know that your life and with your being into guns and shooting, you met, a lot of military and vets. And obviously, which you haven't yet pointed out in my book, I know you're going to get to, that I'm married to a retired Special Forces.
Yes.
And Army 21 years. And my son's also, in fact, he just got out of U.S. Army Rangers just last month.
Oh, wow.
He did a total of, I want to say, 17 years, but would not go with the whole vaccine mandate in 2020. And so started filing his paperwork to get out and managed to dodge it since 2020 and get a full disability, get that income, and then he's cutting ties. But anyway, so that so many men, and here is where we can differentiate the genders, because men and women are different. We're alike, created in the image of God, but different, and beautifully so. Yeah. But so many men are not talking about it. They do not allow themselves to disrupt because they don't have the time. The next mission is calling, etc. But I did ask my husband and my son, since they're very healthy psychologically, they didn't come out with PTSD. And my husband did 21 years, 11 of those Special Forces. My son did, 17. I think he had 8 deployments. And I said, and I started questioning them because I was kind of wanting to see, well, what's different about you guys and other people that come out and just really intense PTSD and other problems. And what they told me, or what I should say my husband specifically, was upper echelons of the military, the Special Forces, they always debrief after every mission, meaning they sit in a room, they talk about it, they talk about the kills, they talk about what went on. Doesn't mean they're still all handling it, because many times after that, they all go out and go to the bar, but they are debriefing. Whereas the regular military guys, which, they call the legs, but those guys, no, not at all. They don't meet like that. Again, the strength of just talking about, just allowing yourself to fall apart to whatever degree, it's healthy and necessary. They still don't get fully what they need because, as you know, a lot of them have to go on and get counseling, and now they're using plant medicines and other things. But obviously the clients I see, I may be one of the first counselors or in a series where they still have things buried and they haven't been able to fall apart. Yeah. When they're able to do that, oh my gosh, the healing that happens is incredible. And then what was the last thing you read?
There's so much, right? Well, one of the, let's see, where did it go? One of the last things I was going to say too, which you kind of referred to as with the pearl, was we have no way of knowing which sorrow will produce the most valuable gem. So we must endure them all. Yes. Oh, I love that. Yes. I love that. And I've had hardships in my life, obviously this injury, number one, but I listen to my clients that come in and their stories, and everybody has suffered. Yeah. It is a part of life, in the 4 noble truths of Buddha. I think it's, the first or the fourth, I don't remember the order, but life is suffering. Christianity, Jesus says, in this world, you will have tribulation. Yeah. Of course, he goes on to say, be of good cheer, for I have overcome the world. But we know that suffering is universal, and every major religion touches on that. And it's also the suffering that many people keeps them from coming to God, because they think, God is good, why is there suffering? Right. Obviously, we know it's a major component of life, and it's not.
going to go away.
That's true. And one of the points you made in your book has to do with the people that are in your corner
Mm.
and the
Yeah.
support that it takes to get through some of that, which I think, especially nowadays, there's more disconnection, not only spiritually, but I think with each other, within families, within communities, that is just, I just don't, sometimes I feel an epidemic almost of being disconnected. And you speak to how important that support system is. And I wanted you to explain to us, because I thought this was so fascinating, the difference between basement people and balcony people. Could you go into that?
Sure. I'm trying to remember. I do remember where I read that again in another book way back. So the basement people in psychology obviously are the people that you have in your life that are devaluing you, that are not respecting your boundaries. They're the people that you are denigrating, you are not, I say that word again, valuing you. I don't want to call them bad people, but there are those people that, and I don't want to say they don't help us grow, because it's often those very people that, like the oyster and the pearl, they're the irritants that get in under our skin.
Right.
Just like the sand, right? And the oyster, and they rub us raw.
Yeah.
Right? They rub us. So they actually help produce in us that gem, but you have to learn healthy boundaries with those people, or they can suck you dry.
Mm-hmm.
They can use you. They can keep inflicting pain on you, and you keep going back for more because of your issues and your family of origin growing up, etc. Everybody that gets into complicated, everybody's life is complicated there, but those are the basement people.
Yeah.
The balcony people, and research resiliency demonstrates that it only takes one person to come out onto our balcony. Those are the people that stand and they take their hats off and they are cheering you on. And we only need one person to believe.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found, even in some of the most traumatic stories that I've heard, very dysfunctional, multiple trauma in lives, is often they'll have many balcony people that come along in their life at certain times that give them enough to keep going. They're the people obviously that give us the praise, that tell us we're worthy, that we know we're loved. In my life, I was very fortunate. My mom was my number one balcony person. And I had a very fortunate, excellent relationship with my mom that helped my entire life.
And I love that you said, and there was a quote, I don't know where it is because I didn't outline it, but you talked about how it can be anyone. It doesn't have to be someone from your family. Sometimes your friends and your community turns into your family, because through some of your moves when you were single, didn't you rely on neighbors and church family? Yeah.
Yes.
To help you get through some of that.
Yes. Do you remember the story in my book that I share about this one woman that I met in church? And I was now a single parent of a 2, 3, and 5-year-old. And she had children similar in age. She was married, but she came along to be such a phenomenal support to me. And I would pull up to her house. I was driving a big Ford Econoline van, because that's what they put me in after I got injured. You need all this metal around you to protect you. And all of a sudden I'm driving a truck. Oh my gosh. But her name was Sheila, and I pull up to her house, and she'd go down her 5 stairs, and she would turn around, and I would piggyback on her, and she would piggyback me up those steps. Our kids would play in the yard. She was such a gift to my life. And then when I was going through a divorce, we were renting a mobile home that had the bathtub in the floor.
I remember that.
And that same woman, during that time until God brought me to a home for my children and I, she would come over to help me with that bathing. And again, put me down in there and pick me back out. The gift of people and their lives to me and their gifts, you'll get me crying again. They were amazing. Even though I've lost touch with her, her gift to my life will never be forgotten.
That's
so
so
yes,
fun.
And resiliency research also says the number one factor is our network of support. Whatever that network becomes, it isn't always going to be in family. You are absolutely right. And family can be made up of a host of different dynamics. It's not always the nuclear family,
Right.
I had people are always surprised. People expect that my time as a single parent and that was 7 years, that it was one of the most difficult times. I actually remember it as a wonderful time. And the church, they don't want you to talk about how wonderful that is. And I was like, well, there are some things that are advantageous to being single and with your kids. You're not fighting with the spouse. You're not fighting over finances. You're the one having to, deal with the finances. again, there's no tension or stress over how you're parenting your children
Mm-hmm.
and different styles that go on there and how you run your home. So I have to say there were other things that were very advantageous. And I found it to be, yes, it was hard on me, but I was in my 29 years old, so still young. And I'm racing around that house. I got the carpets pulled out and wooden floors put in so I could roll,
Yeah.
fast.
Fast.
But I have a lot of very happy memories about the time as a single parent.
Well, and I think that ties into gratitude too, and your attitude and your gratitude, because I think all of us could perceive certain things. We can choose what to focus on. And gosh, I could go in so many directions here because I have a gratitude section. I have a self-image and rewiring section. Nanette, where do I go from here? And a boundaries section too. You touched on that. So I'm trying to think what would best benefit the audience. I mean, really any of these. But I do think this, not just gratitude, but you say living honestly. So let me see what I pulled up for that really quickly. And let's explore that here just for a second, because without gratitude and living honestly, I think we're really missing the mark if we can't be honest with ourselves and each other. Page 200. Oh, I have 4 stars next to this, so it must be really important.
I have my copy of my book here. I'm going to look.
It says, if you lived honestly, your life would heal itself. When you have a clear conscience before God and humankind, you live balanced in near perfect homeostasis. You accept this grace and subsequently experience gratitude, love, and joy in all its fullness and resplendent beauty. Gratitude has become another component of your resilience, regardless if it is formed in joy or in pain. And then on page 203, if we really believe that every adversity, failure, and heartache carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit, we would live our life differently.
Yes, that is, I just glanced at that chapter. The name of that chapter is Praise is the Larger Prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And the hidden pearl is put on gratitude as a copious attitude. I learned very early on when I was seeking God's face after my injury, I just heard the Holy Spirit say to me that the highest form of prayer is praise. This is what I heard. And that I needed to figure that out. I needed to learn that instead of praying, you know how we all do it. We pray and we supplicate, and sometimes we are in contention in our prayer. And not that those prayers aren't good and valuable as well, but I kind of made a shift. And instead of begging God for something, I began to thank him for it in advance. Thank you for this answer. Thank you. So I began to praise, and I began to shift in my mind that I'm going to thank God, who is good. And it says he bestows every good and perfect gift comes from God, from whom there's no variation or shifting shadow, that everything he does is good. Every good that we see in this world is the light shining through the darkness, because as Christians, we believe that we live in a fallen world. It's broken, and that is the darkness that we live in. Every light that breaks through, everything that comes through that's good is God. If we can begin to, so that is his, because of his great love for us, he is designing good for us. All things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. Even though, I got to pause here and I'll get back to the point I was making. Even though when I was first injured and someone came into the hospital, and I still remember this, and I wrote about it. A young girl, I was 22, she was probably 21, part of my youth group, and comes bouncing in with her little, tight blue jeans and shorty top, whatever she had on at the time. And I'm laying there, paralyzed with all those tongs in my head and unable to move for 3 weeks before they did the surgery on my neck and then put the halo on. But anyway, it was the quoting scripture, all things work together for good. And, I just wanted to deck her, because though at that time that's inappropriate, people often don't stop to realize that people often say really insensitive things, myself included. But I remember that so well. And in fact, I wrote a poem at the beginning of my book.
Yeah.
It said I wanted to spit, but feared I would wear the saliva interminably. It just drooled down my face at that point. But I was so mad. That's not the time for those scriptures. But later you realize that, yes, God is working for good.
Thank you for that clarification. I love that.
Yeah. And so there was a big shift though early on, like I'm saying, 22, 23 years old, where I began to pray differently. And I began to shift and pray prayers of praise and thanksgiving instead of prayers of begging and, thinking, questioning, God, will you do this? And I knew that he's good. And let me say one more thing. My favorite verse, and it's actually etched into the wood in our floor in our home. When you come in the door, there's a piece of wood that separates the hallway from the living room. And there in beautiful cursive, it says, thy mercies never cease. Thy compassions fail not. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. And sometimes in our pain, the only thing we can ask God for is a new mercy that day. That's all we need. And that's all we ask for. So there's those kinds of prayers too. And then there's the prayers of praise. So
you are a special woman.
Both of those are super important.
Yeah.
God, I just need your mercy today. That's all I need is a new mercy. You promised it in your word. You promised it for my life. You are compassionate and your mercies are new every morning and you are faithful. So God, I praise you for that faithfulness and your mercy, and I receive it this day. And so that's the combination of those two prayers.
One of my favorite stories in your book. Well, so let me say this first before I say that. This is what I mean, guys. Her book is this way. Her book is like how she is, which is 1 second you can be in just tears, and this next second you can just be laughing hysterically because she has the best sense of humor of anyone I've ever met. And I want to go into one of those funny stories here a little bit later. But first, could you speak? This goes kind of along with what you're saying. Could you speak to the story of how you met Lou? Is you created a list, you had what you call, oh, there's an acronym. I know. I know you know what I mean. Could you go into that, please?
Okay, I'm not sure what the acronym is, so we'll see.
The WIG. The WIG.
Oh, the wildly improbable God-incidences.
Yes.
Yes. Well, I have to tell you that even though I said I love those single parenting years, I too came to a place where I felt like I had just been in the Joan of Arc armor, and it was heavy. It was heavy doing it by myself. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
And besides, I believe that we are designed to be partnered. Not all of us, but I believe the majority. God says he created male and female, and brought them together to be partnered and go forward in life as that strong unit. And so I was missing a spouse as well. So I finally said, Lord, I am ready to be repartnered again. What I did, and it was super valuable, was my kids were all gone. I got out a legal size pad of paper and a pen. Actually, I think it was a pencil so I could erase. I'd laid down on my bed in my room. That's what's most comfortable for me. And I closed my eyes and I asked the Holy Spirit to come. And I said, I want to write down what I want in a future partner. And I just want to free flow right until I stop. So I just prepared myself for that and took my pencil and started. And when I got done, I had 36 things.
Wow.
And I was like, wow. And when I tell people this, sometimes they say, are you anal retentive? No, I looked back over the list and it was, again, I'm getting a degree, I'm going along getting my degree in psychology. So what was this person's conflict resolution skills like? I was 37 years old at the time, 36. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm probably going to find a man who's already been married. He's either already been married, he's widowed, divorced, or never been married. If he's never been married, and I'm thinking I'm 36, 37, probably a guy the same age, 40. If he's never been married, that's a flag. I don't need to go into that. It is a flag. So I figured widowed or divorced. So on my list, it was, okay, what's his relationship? Does he have children? Relationship with ex-wife? So I really felt that when I looked over my list, I wasn't being, by any sense of the word, ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Everything was very important. There weren't very many physical features. I actually wanted a man that was shorter so that my neck isn't like looking up. And I really wanted a short, stocky stud, which is exactly what I got. Someone to pick me up, put me in the jacuzzi. We went sit skiing in Colorado when I lived there. He could piggyback me out to the beach. I wanted that. So I made my list and then I kind of tucked it away. Then, this takes way too long to do in our segment, but then that I call it a prophetic word. I was driving home one day, and out of the clear blue sky, I heard, Nannette, you're to relocate. And I was like,
Didn't
what?
like that.
I didn't like it at all. I was settled with my children in the beautiful city where I live in the mountains. And I was, what are you talking about, God? And I was, no way, no way. And then finally, when I realized that, okay, you don't really have these, again, this was like a thunderbolt moment where I didn't hear an audible voice, but it was so out of the blue of nothing I would ever think of. I knew God was speaking to me. I said, how often do you get those?
Right.
So I better pay attention. And then I asked him, well, where to? And he said, Colorado Springs. And I'm like, I don't know anybody in Colorado Springs and that whole thing. And ultimately, I just filed that. And then about 2 months later, I get this invitation in the mail from a Christian organization in Colorado Springs. And they're inviting 52 women across America, 2 from each state, to this women's retreat. And I'm picked from Arizona. I don't know how, I don't know why. And I'm thinking, I can't go because the retreat is the exact same week of the US Open. And I'm training to go play the US Open every year. And that's one of the big 4 majors. And so I can't go. There's no way I can go. And then it's like,
Did you instantly see that connection, though? Did it instantly come to you when you got it in the mail?
Yes, because Colorado Springs had not been on my radar, period, until I had heard that voice or that premonition driving down the road that it's time to relocate and where Colorado Springs. And then 2 months later, I get an invitation. And then I'm like, no, I can't go. I end up going because I say, how many times has this happened in your life? Something this profound. And as you know, I'm there, and I can't tell you this story, but this is, one of the greatest stories about the stone, right, in the basket, and that God speaks to me and basically tells me 3 things, and that my future partner is there in Colorado Springs. And I grabbed the stone out of the basket, which, by the way, since I already shared this, that stone is in our wooden floor in the living room.
Oh, wow.
So that's a whole story in my book I don't have time to unpack. That's amazing, amazing. But it brings me to Colorado, and then there I am out by the pool. And I happened to look over, and I did say this, and it's so funny because it's still on my phone to this day. I say in my book, I spied a bodacious babe lying on a lounge. And if you look at my phone, for my husband, it's Bodacious. And he has had that name for 24 years with me because that's who I spied on a lounge, laying there in his short little army shorts and kind of the crew cut, and little woofy dog under his lounge that he was laying on, and he's reading a book. And I thought, okay, he's a reader too. That's a good thing. And anyway, I met Lou at one point after dating him for about, I think maybe 4 months. I found my list because I had moved there, and it got put in a box, and then I was looking at it, and there were things that he did not check off. Mm-hmm. And of course, the main thing, and I think I'll leave this for, I just don't have time, but the main thing was, he was not a believer. His dog tag said agnostic. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what? God, you brought me all this way. I'm falling in love with this man. The chemistry is amazing. He came right in with me as a single parent and my kids, and was just like, went grocery shopping for me and build fires because needed more fires in Colorado to stay warm. And just an amazing man. And the number one thing on that list of 36 was that we would be spiritually aligned. Like, that's the number one. We were not. Mm-hmm. And so then I had to go through all of seeking God on that. And I do want to say this, I guess to use a plumber's term, my plumb line has always been the Word of God. When I get to a place in my life and there could be confusion or about a decision, I'm praying about it, I've always said, I have to go back to the Word of God. It doesn't matter that it was written centuries ago. We're talking Old Testament now. I will find my answer there. God, you will speak to me there, because I believe it's as relevant today as it was back then. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to really, really truncate this story, but I asked God to show me, and he brought me to the book of Ruth, and it's 4 chapters. And Ruth was a Moabite woman. So she was a pagan. Mm-hmm. She was a heathen. She was an agnostic, or at least she was in her own other religion. Yet she became, if you look, she is in the genealogy of Christ because she ended up marrying a Jew who was Boaz. Then Boaz had, I think, the grandfather of David. Anyway, Jesus is in that whole genealogy, out of the box stuff. And God said to me, Lou is your Moabite. I bless this union. And that's all I needed. And then the only thing I want to cap on that, because it's incredible, 10 years, 12 years later, I get him a book for Christmas. It's Blue Bloods, 4 generations of cops, because he got out of the military and then he became a deputy for our local sheriff's department here. And we're reading our books in the morning, sipping our coffee. That was before iPhones and iPads, and right?
Yeah.
Still reading books. And I know. He goes, you have to read this. And he hands me the book. Like I say, we've been married 10, 12 years by now, maybe 15. And it's giving me a paragraph of all of the old verbiage used for police officers from the 1800s. Prigger nappers, pigs, we've heard that. I mean, it's just going on and on and on. And I get down to the last line and it says, Moabites.
No way.
Exactly. And I said, you see how good, in fact, you see how good you are, God. You so knew back then when I sought your face, and Lou was a police officer at that exact time. I read that this was my Moabite. So we also have to give people the girth to follow God and hear God and not judge them, because I had people who did judge me and say, oh, that marriage will never work out. What are you doing marrying an unbeliever? And I said, I'm going to tell you what the Holy Spirit has told me. And I have an amazing marriage. And my husband did not come to the Lord, did not embrace my belief system for probably easily a decade of our marriage. And it was never contentious because my husband honored me. We took my children to church. He was there to respect me, respect how I was raising my children. He had all of the Christian virtues. Loyal. He's an honest person. He has integrity. He was living all those out already.
Yeah.
So, but that wasn't a point of contention, and people are blown away by that. And I didn't push it on him and try to, I did say, you can listen to your ZZ Top in the garage because I'm just and he'd never heard of Maranatha music.
He sounds like an amazing, brilliant guy. I think one of the descriptions you used to describe him was, you said steel and velvet.
Yes, that was
on that.
That was on my list. I wanted a man who was both steel and velvet. I think it's a beautiful combination, strong, and yet they know how to be soft, and they're the soft place for you to fall. And a man who would honor women equally. And that was another amazing thing, because I thought when I met him, by then I had already moved into an egalitarian interpretation of scripture, which is that men and women are created equal, equal in the home, equal in business, equal in the church. They can, any positions, there's no headship in the home. It is an equal partnership. And I thought, military, I mean, come on, that's such a hierarchical institution, right? But no, Lou was completely an egalitarian himself. He'd never heard of the word. And when I asked him, he's like, what's that?
Yeah.
But he was already living that. And even, at the sheriff's department, he's like, male or female, there are men that I would never want to have my back. I'd rather that woman deputy have my back, or vice versa. It was all about skill and not gender. When I met him, he was retiring from the U.S. Army, 21 years. And he basically said, I've seen the world. And then he said, I'm here to be like the wind beneath your wings, to let you fly. And it was like,
wow.
Since you got me on a passionate topic, what I would say on that topic is, I always say to the couples I counsel as well, the 2 most important words to make a relationship work is mutual respect. Oftentimes, if they're coming to me, they're not mutually respecting one another. That is all broken down. That is the most important thing in any relationship, female and female, male and male, father, daughter, parent, child, friends.
I think what spoke to me the most in your book regarding that, I mean, what you just said about mutual respect, absolutely hit the nail on the head. And then the part in your book about boundaries was very, because boundaries are talked about a lot in the self-improvement space. I don't think the breakdown of what it really means. I've never heard it said the way that you said it in your book. And so it made more sense to me when I read it in your book, and I actually have that on my notes too, if we want to go there.
Yes. Yes.
Go there. Okay.
I'm otherwise having to look it up and what I said.
Well, it starts on 144. There's a few big sections about it on 144, 147, and 150, but let's see here. Boundaries are the intangible, invisible barriers or limits that define us. They define what is me and what is not me. Boundaries are about setting limits and respecting others' limits. They delineate our responsibility and lead us to a sense of ownership. They preserve and protect the core essence of who we are. Like that is like 5 layers deeper than what my concept of a boundary was.
Yes.
Because how important, that just brings out how incredibly important they are. And then it says healthy boundaries are the gateway to enhance relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And it says boundaries deal with yourself and not the other person, which I think I was misinformed about. You and you alone are responsible for your choices, feelings, thoughts, and behaviors.
Yes, let me pause you there because that
Yeah.
is still a line that I use all the time in my coaching relationships with my clients, and they hate to hear it. And
Yeah.
I tell them, you're going to hate to hear this. A boundary is always about you and not the other person. Always. And they're like, what do you mean? What do you mean?
Yeah.
And then I'll go through the story they just told me because it was obviously a violation of their boundaries, and they'll be blaming that person. And I'll say, hold on, this is about you. You have to teach people how to treat you. And you don't always know, it can sever a relationship. And I'm going to give you a personal boundary violation that recently happened to me that everybody listening to this is going to get. In our digital age, the phone has become its own demonic source in this respect. The problem that people are having with texting and boundaries is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And I am dealing with it with people in their 70s. Really? I mean, this is affecting people from teenagers to 70 years old and the problems that it's creating. And I'll give you one example. Fortunately, a good friend of mine and I were able to heal, but we did have a rift in the relationship for maybe a year. And what happened is a good friend of mine, every year we're very fortunate. Our family is able to go to a beach house in California and spend a week there. And it's amazing. Mm-hmm. And I'm so thankful to God for that opportunity. And what my husband and I do is the first 3 days is adults only. So it's just us and our friends. And then the final 3 days is kids and grandkids and that whole thing.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of fun. So she was invited to that first 3 days with other friends. I noticed that the year before last, she had her phone sitting there and we were outside at $1 million view. Beautiful time. She's just there for 2 days. We're sitting 3 or 4 of us women and the phone is right there, flipped over so she can see it. And she's constantly looking to see, is she getting a text or is she getting a phone call? I didn't like it because basically I didn't think I needed to say to my adult friends, but I say to my family and kids, hey, it's a time to stay off digital devices when we go. Mm-hmm. Like a no digital zone. That's what we're there for, right? Because this is becoming divisive with every relationship now.
Yeah.
So anyway, I didn't say anything to her, but it irritated me. Well, 6 months later, I took her out for her birthday and I hadn't seen her in the 6 months. I mean, we've talked and texted, okay, but I hadn't seen her. And so I'm taking her out. I'm buying her dinner. I'm going to spend 2 hours with her and her phone's on the table and the same thing. So finally, I confronted her. No, I didn't confront her, which what I mean is I ended up emailing her. I want to tell you that is generally against the principles that I set for myself and my clients, which is if you can see someone face to face and in person, that is the first way you should engage them. I did not follow my own principles. I will just tell you in this case, I was kind of tired. So I decided to email her because the next year the beach house was coming up and I said, love you to come. And that's when I brought up the phone thing. Mm-hmm. Okay. She said to me, oh, I didn't know you were offended. And I thought about it and I thought, I wasn't offended. I was devalued because you were putting your digital world above our time together. And it's 2 days. And she was in a place where she could leave that world behind. It's not like she was running a business. Like my son, sometimes he's like, Mom, I own this business. I do need to be available. I understand that. I'm an understanding person. That's what I do from. Anyway, long story short, she got offended then by my response and said she wasn't coming.
Wow.
And I thought, that's her choice. And I knew before I set the boundary that could be her choice, that she would just bow out. Well, she bowed out of the beach house that year and she bowed out of our relationship and all over the phone, all over, right? So this is happening everywhere. I kind of was like, I had already accepted that I could lose this friendship. And this was an important friendship to me. And let me tell you, as you're older, and I'm a good 20, 25 years older than you, maybe not so much, I don't know. But your friendships become even more important because you don't build solid friendships later on in life the same as earlier in life, or at least generally you're not out engaging in the same way. Anyway, that I knew that friendship could go by the way. And I was willing to accept that, because if you can't even value me enough to come and want to spend face-to-face time and engage and laugh and enjoy and not have this interruption from this digital world that is consuming everybody, right? Fortunately, this past April, I decided to send her a birthday card, a digital birthday card, because I do have Jackie Lawson, and Jackie Lawson's great if you know who she is. But anyway, she's a British artist who's designed these online cards with music, and they're a lot of fun.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun. And I decided just to send her one and express my love to her. And she texted me, of course, and said how much it meant to her. And then I picked up the phone and I called her and I said, she said something about getting together. And I picked up the phone and said, let's get together.
Yeah.
Now let's get together. And we were able to mend those fences. And if I can just say one more thing to that story, I was telling her, look, we are in our 60s. And if you end up in the hospital, this digital world of people are not going to be there for you.
Yeah.
I'm going to be there. My husband's going to be there. Our other friends in the community are going to be there. And she cut everybody out. And by the time I reconnected with her, that digital world had fallen apart. And she was all alone. Her marriage had fallen apart. She was homeless. She was right in a place and sleeping on someone's couch. She just wept with joy that I had reached back out and re-embraced our friendship and reconnected with her. And so we're past that. We are reunited again. But what I'm saying is boundaries are always about you and not the other person. And if you're feeling devalued or feeling disrespected, you have to do that and be willing whatever the consequences are. So let me just tie that into one more thing. My first marriage ended because of adultery. And I had 3 little kids, as a sit-down woman. Yeah. And I had to make a choice. And my choice was, okay, this is going to be hell. This is going to be hard. But I respect myself too much to, one, I thought I had married someone with the same principles that I had, which is fidelity. And 2, I'm sorry, I'm not bringing any STD into my marriage. To me, I'm not risking that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm already dealing with enough with a spinal cord injury. I don't need that on top of it. And, I didn't see the repentance in actions. I had to make a decision. That decision to become a single parent with 3 children as a sit-down mom was one of the hardest, toughest, biggest decisions. But oh my gosh, the wisest and the best decision that I made. I have no regrets for that decision.
And that's usually the case.
Tough.
Yeah.
But I had to say, no, I respect myself too much. And this is going to be tough, but God, you're going to see me through, because this is a right decision as well. And so a boundary is always about you and not the other person.
That is so helpful. So helpful.
Yeah. And Laura, you are right. The issue of boundaries is a major component of relationships, of communication. It is huge. And most people don't realize how ginormous it is. It's huge. Yeah.
Until the aftermath, probably, of lacking that skill. Do you call that a skill?
I do call it a skill, because as I say in my book, when you start to enforce boundaries, and remember the Payne's hidden pearl at the end of that chapter is Payne's 13th hidden pearl: enforce boundaries for self-preservation.
Yeah. It
is a tool. And what I write in that chapter is, when you first start to get stronger in enforcing a boundary, don't start out with someone who's a boundary buster. What I mean by that is, don't start out with someone who's just going to sweep right over you and have no respect for you. That is the most difficult person to do that with. But start out somewhere where you're going to meet with success. Start small, on a small scale. And then, like you say, it is a skill. It's a muscle. You'll strengthen it. You'll get stronger. You'll get bolder. Your woman of warrior spirit will rise up. And, you'll set that, because God wants us to be strong, and God is the author of respect. It's the enemy who disrespects. It's the enemy of God who's father of lies.
Right. That's so helpful.
Awesome.
There's a lot more we could go in. Like we only have halfway of, but that's okay. I'm putting things in priority mode now because I don't want to run out of time. The last thing I think I want to end on, unless you have something better, is this story of adaptability that is on page 123 cracked me up to no end. I loved it so much. Prior to this story, you were talking about the personality traits of survivors. Let's see here. Where do I begin? I feel like we could have like a whole series of interviews instead of just one. But so you talk about how, and this is from, let me quote the person that said this, which isn't you, but you put this in your book. The book is called The Survivor Personality by Dr. Al Siebert. And Dr. Siebert discovered that survivors have a paradoxical or biphasic personality traits such as strong versus gentle, proud versus humble, mature versus playful, which increase survivability by allowing a person to be one way or its opposite in any situation. And then you go on to say life's best survivors sometimes feel like misfits, and a key source of their strength is viewed by some people as emotional instability. This is funny because it makes me feel like I'm not weird.
Awesome.
Yeah, like it's totally normal. If you look at someone who does not handle life well, it's often because this person always thinks, feels, or acts in only one way and would never consider the opposite. People with rigid thinking can't handle complex people very well and often view them as defective. Now, you have a story that complements this, and I don't know if you'd rather I read it or rather you tell it. But it is hilarious. And it is when you were at a championship in St. Louis and it started raining and people were taking cover and you had to go to the restroom, but the lights were out, right? Do you want to go into that or do you want me to read it?
I can just kind of summarize it, I think.
Okay.
I have it right here.
It's the funniest moment in your book to me. I loved it.
Oh, thank you for that. Sometimes, again, when you write a book and you include, because I've included other people's stories as well.
Yeah.
And then you go back and read it and you go, oh, I don't know, that was kind of dumb, or,
No.
And so it's great to hear that.
I thought it was brilliant.
Before I go into this story, I had the wonderful opportunity to meet Dr. Siebert.
Did you?
I did. And he lived up in Portland and I was playing a tennis tournament up there and he came out with his wife. We had dinner and my husband and
wow,
we just had a great time. That was amazing. Yeah. So we had a thunderstorm. I was at this huge tournament and of course it was an electrical blackout in the hotel. We couldn't get to our rooms. We couldn't get up the elevators. Of course, there's all these chair users. We're all hanging out in the lobby and I had to go to the bathroom and I rolled over there and there's a woman standing at the door. And she tells me, it's pitch black in there. And I was like, and she says, what are we going to do? And I stared at her for a minute. And then I said, well, let me go to the front desk and ask if I can get a flashlight. It's something that I have had to learn is that problem solving skill because I was forced to. Mm-hmm. I can remember one other really quick story in my book where we couldn't reach the fans. This is when I was a single parent, the string on the fan to turn it on. I couldn't reach it. And this was before I had air conditioning in my house or anything else. So there were my 3 kids. What are we going to do? We started, trying to pile up pillows and just to stack them. So one of the kids could reach the other. So you have to start problem solving. And instead of stopping in your life and saying, I can't do this, it's overwhelming, which happens to all of us. We use that old adage of, how do you eat the elephant? One bite at a time. Yeah. How do you solve it? You stop and say, okay, what are my resources? What can I do here? Yeah. And that again empowers us to conquer and to overcome. So I went and got a flashlight. I returned to the ladies' bathroom. She held open the door. I said, it's dark, but it's doable. She says, you go ahead. I'll hold the door open for you, but I'll wait until the lights come back on. Okay, I guess you didn't have to go that bad. I rolled in and I couldn't help thinking, and I guess I can read a bit here since you love the story. Is she serious? She has considerably less to accomplish in the dark than I do. Being a spinal cord injured person, all of our biological functions have been paralyzed and compromised. And so even going to the bathroom on a daily basis is a chore. Mm-hmm. So anyway, she slides her foot out from under the door and there I am in total darkness with my flashlight's ghoulish glow. So I sat there for a few horrified moments. hearing. And I'm glad that you love this because I'm so much older than you. I didn't know if you'd know who Get Smart was. So you did dum, dum, dum in my head and seeing heavy metal doors slamming consecutively closed. That's from the old TV show. And then he also back then, Get Smart, had a phone in the bottom of his shoe. So see, you didn't know that. So I said, should I search for the phone in the bottom of my shoe? Like, okay, what am I going to do? After a few seconds, I collected my wits and reeled around to make sure Ms. Doorstopper was not some maniacal stranger lurking in the dark behind me. So again, being in gun safety, we as females have to constantly, unfortunately, it's the world we live in. Wherever we go, we need to be aware of our surroundings.
Yeah.
And I, as a sit-down woman, had to be especially aware. Anyway, I'm looking around to see maybe she's some maniac. When I returned to the lobby, she was nowhere to be found. And anyway,
the reason I love the story so much is because you think the way I do. That is what I think that's what I would have done. Like, okay, we have a problem. Let's figure out a solution. And then you had to be so independent, beyond independent in that moment, not to just even go get the flashlight, but then you couldn't even rely on the lady to keep her foot in the door to have any kind of light. You know what I mean? She said I'd hold the door, and then she didn't even do that. And there you were yet again, figuring things out, and just like, well, here I am,
Yeah.
and
because we have to self-cap, we kind of need both hands to go to the bathroom. So I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to put the flashlight and how I'm going to do that. And you just got to figure things out. And because this is how life is, right? It always is throwing us a curveball. And you're right. A lot of people lack how you build resilience and how you build these skills is you start with that first step, and you start by saying, I will face this fear. That's the other thing. I will face this fear. And every time we conquer a fear, or we conquer something of the unknown, we become stronger. And then you have to have the intellectual know-how too, when you say, okay, God, this is bigger than me. I don't know how to get out of this. Like, I need divine intervention. And you have to know when you have to call upon that too.
And what do you think too about, it's funny because we're in Nehemiah right now. We're studying Nehemiah, and I so admire Nehemiah. I love that what I'm learning about Nehemiah is that he goes to prayer first. He goes to God first when something's happening. Whereas I believe many people go to God last when they can't figure it out themselves. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so is that something that you have implemented, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I have to tell you, because you're going to love this, you need to go to my website on my blog, because last year I did an entire series on Nehemiah.
Did you?
Because God revealed to me last year that we needed to say strong, sacred, armed. And I use that. I did the whole book in Nehemiah. That's what he brought me: strong, sacred, armed. And some people would think that's an oxymoron, sacred and armed. It's kind of like my dog's name is Winchester. My husband wanted it for the rifle.
I wondered.
But I wanted it because the name in Gaelic, Winnie, means blessed peacemaker. And so my dog represents the paradoxical character of God, who is both warrior and peacemaker. A resilient personality is biphasic, which is what Dr. Siebert said. We cannot think black and white. The world, there are black and white principles. God's word are principles that say this is black and this is white. In today's social milieu, there is a male and a female, not 69 sexes or whatever the number is up. That's black and white. But then we have to be flexible enough, gray enough to love and embrace all of those nuances. And that's also what makes us adaptable and resilient.
I can't thank you enough for this interview. You're a gift. You're a gift. Yeah. Thank you for writing that book.
Thank you for reading it. A lot of people aren't reading books, unfortunately.
Well, and I think that's a perfect time to plug the book. Let's tell people, where can they go to find the book? They can go to your website, right?
painpowerandpromise.com.
Okay.
And then if you want to put it in your show notes, True Potential Publishing is my publisher, truepotentialpublishing.com, in case people wanted to get more than one book and at a discounted price. And, he does more.
And you can buy an autographed copy too.
You can get that from me at painpowerandpromise.com. I will send you an autographed copy. And I also have a line of inspirational cards.
Yes, and they're very good.
So I also have that as well.
Wait,
yes.
Here, wait, I have those. Look. Here are some of them.
Yes.
And that quote that I said earlier about lightning strike, thunderbolt.
Yes, that's on there. Yes, that was not my quote. Again, I'm quoting someone else, so I don't remember who that is. That is on there. That is one of the inspirational cards, and also for any speaking engagements or other podcasts. Anyone can reach me on my website, my email, my phone is there.
Thank you.
God bless you.